I'm feeling really grateful for having Dr. Janice Hughes on to share with us about how to talk about, manifest, and organize all things money. So, as soon as she goes into the content, you're going to want to start taking notes. There's so much good stuff in this interview with Dr. Janice Hughes. I hope you enjoy every minute.
And my personality, I like new projects, I like challenges. I also ended up leaving the profession for a period of time and doing money raising for a biotech company. And that's where I really pivoted and realized a lot of my own blocks about money, abundance, and where and how that had impacted things in my life. And when I was learning to money raise and ask for at first tens of thousands of dollars, then hundreds of thousands of dollars, and eventually the minimum to invest in our company was $1 million, it really helped me to understand some of the money energy and concepts. So I share a little bit of those multiple roles because then as my day-to-day job in our biotech ended a few years ago, I basically came back with the intention to mentor and guide and help particularly as many women in the profession as possible. So that's, Jody, for it really makes my heart sing that obviously, as you were talking about, who some women would like to learn from, that helps me feel great. It helps me feel like at least my mission or what I set out to do in the last couple of years, like has planted some seeds so that people realize that.
I love the permission that you give women to, I think that women stay, especially, okay, let me back the bus up. So I'm a Sherman grad. I went to Sherman College of Straight Chiropractic. If you're a chiropractor, you know that Sherman is all about LACVS, locate, analyze, correct vertebral subluxation. Anything outside of that box is not chiropractic, right? We're taught that in school. I was taught that for the past 30 years, I've learned that. And somehow my interpretation of that turned into you just have to do chiropractic, and doing anything outside of the box of chiropractic really is a disservice. That's the message that's how I interpreted it. Not that that's what the message was. So the permission that powerful women like yourself give other powerful women to go on a search for what really serves you. I think about one of the doctors in our group who is starting to do online courses for women with cancer who are processing their cancer, going through all that. Whatever it is that floats your boat, wherever your spirit flies highest, go. And then there are people like you who say, this is how it's done. You can do this. I'm giving you permission to do this. And you know what? For whatever reason, some of us need that permission. I needed that permission for about my first 10 years in practice. And then when I got that permission, watch out, world, right? So with that being said, let's talk about how we identify the problems of money management, money language. How do you hand over the keys, so to speak? Like when we're talking about the freedoms with money and trusting people with money, it's so loaded. So talk to us a little bit about how to, first of all, identify the problems as they come up.
So the two pieces you just talked about tie together. The first being that permission, like I want people to understand, it's key to start to tap into if there were no rules and I couldn't fail, what would I love my practice? What would I love my business to look like? So as an example, this last year, almost 18 months, I've done some consulting work within chiropractic for a group that all focuses on functional neurology. And a lot of them use modalities and different approaches and some really cool technology. Well, I was a subluxation based chiropractor. I'm like you, Jody. Like I didn't know any different. It was like, oh my God, all those modalities. I don't want any of that. Well, my God, some of these practitioners are analyzing and showing me that I miss so much walking through my door because I never tapped into those things. Now, some of you, it might be nutrition, or I love your example of like somebody who's got that experience, like navigating through cancer, like, oh my Lord, like, and if that makes her heart sing to then provide resources, that's smart business. So those same principles, like if you, it took you 10 years, and then as you got permission, look at how freeing that was. Well, it's the same about money. So we, like practice wise, there's been a lot of, I call them the mother, father, teacher, preachers. Well, you have to do this, or this is the way you do it, and this is the model of practice. And then a lot of women, for example, were told, well, if you're not going to run $1 million practice, there's no point. Where's that come from? Like, so just as an example, I, for a lot of years, coached for, at the time, the biggest management group in the profession, and probably to this day they're still the biggest management group there ever was. And I saw all these people's stats, and I like to call the BS card the bullshit card, because if it takes you $900,000 to run that $1 million practice, like how freeing is that? You know, and I could show, there's two examples that come to mind. A female that totally bucked the system, ran a cash practice. People would say she had a really small practice compared to all these big guns. She was so profitable. It was unbelievable. Like she had really low overhead. She got lots of freedom. It wasn't a stress if suddenly there was a snowstorm and the practice wasn't open. So, you know, her numbers are what drove the things that made sense for her. Another female practitioner that I didn't coach directly, but I was on a call and I could pull up and access everybody's numbers. And she kept talking about, I only run a part-time practice. And finally I stopped her. I said, okay, time out. You obviously run the best damn part-time gig I've ever seen in my life. Like in 3 days, she helped more patients than a lot of people help in 5 or 6 days a week. Like, so you can see, like, we all carry all this baggage. Well, you notice a lot of the baggage in our profession is tied to money. Everybody talks about how many visits they see. But as soon as I start to ask questions like, what's your OVA? What's your case average? Well, can you decide whether you're going to market based on what's your typical case average? So would that Facebook ad, or would that thing you're going to do generate a 3-to-1, a 5-to-1 return? And if so, why wouldn't you do it? But you notice that that's very different language. So even our conversations today about money, you notice that it's a continuum about the freedom to practice what you would love, or build your business in the way that you would love, and be more creative and be more flexible. And then now, how do we bring that to money? Because the biggest block is that most of us are still not talking about money, or we're talking in ways that we have so much baggage based on the way we were brought up, or the way our practice has been. Like, so it all filters together, Joey.
So when you, hold on, I got to get myself here. There I am. When you say what you say so eloquently, I think about, I would say half of our SEWP students, and if you guys don't know who we are and what we're doing, we've created an online finishing school of sorts for women in practice who are really looking to run things without staff, or looking to automate the systems for their staff. And for our new SEWP students who just graduated school and they hear you, and I think we even talked about this in your content in SEWP School, they hear you talking about income and creating other streams of income, and they go into this place of overwhelm, like, I just want to be able to pay my rent this month.
Yes.
All of what you're saying is really fancy and really cool. And maybe in 10 years from now, what do you say to them with, thinking about, how do I manage money? How do I hand the keys over? How do I start thinking about it?
Well, we just start with abundance thinking. You know, the kiss of death is to say, well, when I do this, then I'll begin to figure that out. So when I can pay my bills, then I'll start learning new money principles. Well, that's the slow boat to China. If you start now understanding money is energy, and Jody has access to the ebook. Like years ago, I co-authored a book about money, and then we converted it into an ebook. And so any of Jody's people, anybody listening, can just instantly get access to that download. The key is start now. So I go to schools. I am part of teaching a business class at one school. I do all school assemblies at Life West. Like there's so many schools and presidents and people that I know. And I actually, when I go into a classroom or talk to students, say, start now. What are the things you can do now? So it's even things like with students, helping them understand credit scores and repairing credit scores and really smart strategies for finding money to buy their business or set their businesses up. You know, some of you have been running your practice and almost that fear of, well, will there be dollars in there to make those payments? Well, like literally getting an operating line of credit attached to your accounts, which every one of you should have been offered as a professional, but most of, you know, young startups, they don't anymore. You know, having that, not that you want to overspend, but that you could get over the stress of, well, will that payment clear? Like, so you can see, Jody, I'm saying to all of you new starting up or that aren't having extra, let's learn these principles now, because that attracts the extra. That's where the extra is going to start to come from. So it's really abundance thinking about money and finances and embracing. Some of you, you know, again, it may just be saying things like, I'm becoming a badass businesswoman. You might not feel it yet, but that's where you can say, I am becoming a businesswoman. You know, and again, like this you holding the keys to the kingdom we're talking about is that so many times we give our power with money to someone else. We give our power to our accountants. Mm-hmm. The same thing. Like I kind of sort of knew my numbers, but then all of a sudden, as I was beginning to thrive, you know, I would start to ask my accountant, oh, well, I heard so-and-so and their accountant talking about this strategy. And, you know, he'd patiently walk me through. And so we were doing a review, my husband and I, with our accountant. And finally, after about my third question, he stopped me and he said, you know, Janice, what I need you to understand is I'm your bean counter. I'm your accountant that keeps you clean. I'm not your financial advisor. I'm not your wealth manager. Like most smart, well-off people begin to find those resources. So even eventually, I learned the principles when I was money raising of working with very well-to-do people that had a family office. And what they did is they hired their own accountant, lawyer, you know, usually land purchase, real estate person, and they all became part of that wealthy family's family office. Well, now guess what? You or I aren't there. We're not hiring all that. But in essence, you are already, because you pay your accountant or you pay a lawyer or you pay this person. And in many cases, like you've given your power to them versus you being the driver of it all. So it's even right now, any of you listening, like I just spoke with someone that I knew while they were a student, and I already, last week we talked about it, and then this week we followed up. I connected him with a financial coach that's going to help guide him through his debts, what he has. He's an associate, getting ready to begin to plan launching on his own. And, you know, there's really smart people that don't charge you a dime to help you review things, whether it's all of those things, or whether it's just how you start like making a change financially. Because just as an example, a lot of people, for you early, because we're still talking, Jody, about like, what do I say to those people just beginning? Most people will say, well, when you're out of debt or when you have your debt handled, then you can do this. The same thing, that's the kiss of death. You're losing years of wealth building options. And so a lot of it, Jody, is just like, how do we help people in SEWP School, anyone listening, to learn, how do I take action and learn these principles now? Because I'm going to tell you, it's going to return in dividends.
I love everything you just said. And you know, I get calls all the time. I don't even know where to start. And my answer is always, you start where your feet are. Where are your feet right now? What do you have on your plate right now that needs to be figured out? If you're overwhelmed, yes, these are all things that need to be on the table and need to be figured out. But if you're in a place of, oh, there's nothing worse than making a decision about money or food when you're in a place of overwhelm, right? So the first part is to take a deep breath and know that the answer is there. But if we search for the answer from a reactive place, it's going to be a much different answer that we find than if we search for the answer from a place of power and empowerment and abundance consciousness. So with that being said,
not, go ahead. And it's not only all of you listening that don't like to talk about money. I realized, so when I went to start raising money for our biotech, CEOs, a chiropractor, very interesting team of women. I knew thousands of chiropractors. So I thought, oh, piece of cake, I can get started with chiropractors investing. Well, the number one thing I found out is most chiropractors can't afford to invest. Most chiropractors have built a job for themselves. So it doesn't matter whether you're just at a school or whether you're running those $1 million practices. A lot of those people still couldn't invest. So recognize, I started to laugh and say, my first few Facebook Lives about money in the profession, I said, wow, it's interesting. People would rather talk to me about their sex life than they would about their money. So please know, like we're all in the same place. Like it's just learning to talk about it, and that there are some resources, and Jody's pulled together these resources to make it okay, to help you with some of those steps. So that's why, Jody, fire away with some questions so we can make sure that everybody listening also feels like, oh, I can take that step.
Okay, like, let's start with
one. Yeah, like number one, we're going to help any of you. Like if some of you need a financial review, you're gonna have Jody give you my contact, or you're going to private message me, and I'm going to introduce you to a financial coach that can help you with that. Like, we're going to provide you with resources.
Again, you guys, if you're in SEWP School, Dr. Hughes has so much good stuff in school. Pull it apart, write it down, grab your superstar toolkit, and just go for it with all of your pens and all of your happy places, right? So we do have our first question from Dr. Schroeder. This is the first year of having my business/CPA. Is there anything you'd recommend me asking my accountant, or any advice in general?
Yeah, fabulous question. Because the challenge with the accounting side, you know, we come out of school and we have so many debts. And so you've got all these write-offs in the very beginning, or like on paper, it looks like you're not making 5 cents. Well, the challenge is then as you begin to grow, all of a sudden the first problem hits that you are now in April finding out that last year's numbers showed more profit, and you have to pay some back tax, and now they want you to make your first installment for this new year. So fabulous question, because one of the things I learned drove me crazy, and as I was having like money coming in, but I felt like, my God, I'm still like not making ends meet. What I realized is that waiting till year end or going over things then with my accountant was a little too late. So I pivoted and I began to do quarterly reviews with my accountant. So quarterly, pulling all the numbers, having your P&L, and what, if any, changes need to be made? Now, I know the first thing that you're going to say is exactly where people gave me feedback and said, well, Janice, that's crazy. Now you're going to pay your accountant 4 times a year to pull your information together. But guess what? The 4th time, the end of the year, was just a quarterly review. I spent less that year with more, I'm going to say, ease. Like, money stress keeps me up at night. And all of a sudden, I knew where I stood. I knew any changes I needed to make. I never got into a mess with a major tax bill that I couldn't pay. That is worth dividends. So it's fabulous. Like again, a part of it though too, even with a CPA, is begin to learn what those P&Ls, what your profit and loss statements are telling you. So I do valuations for some of the doctors I've known for years of their practice. And some of you that are about to buy a practice will look at a P&L and say, but at the end of the year, they only show this much profitability, very little. Well, that's because they've got a great accountant, because in many cases, you pay yourself out of the business. You're the key staff. So you pay yourself and the tax is taken off, that you are like already servicing that. Then you're dealing with the extra, like the profitability. But if you can quarterly review that, and then what or how you make any appropriate allocations, by the end of the year, you're not going to have a whole bunch of profitability sitting in the business that you now have to pay more taxes on. So I hope, does that answer? So let's ask also, like, for the feedback along the way, like, even as we go on to other things, like, does that at least help you a little bit with the beginning accounting piece? Like, make sure you say to your accountant, I am never going to pay a large unknown tax amount because we didn't look at this soon enough.
You guys write that down. That's huge, huge. So let's talk about an accountant. Let's just go to basics. How do we pick an accountant?
You, as you go into practice, will suddenly have a whole bunch of people come to you and or patients that say, well, I'm an insurance agent, so I would love you as my chiropractor and I want to be your insurance agent. And that's usually how we're picking accountants and lawyers and financial planners and stop it right now. like I'm not saying that they might not be that person. So your accountant may be somebody who has come to you, but do some research. Who do they work with? As I was growing and I was working with the same accountant of mine, and I was bringing him some things that, there's a group that is doing the accounting for a lot of chiropractors and they're telling people to do this. And my accountant was really funny. He's like really analytical, really straight-laced. He said, well, that's great. Let's talk to them when they're all audited. And I went, okay, I get it. Like, I get that that's probably a little shady. And now if all of them are doing the same thing, that's like a red flag to the IRS. So you want someone that is strong, analytical, like ask them what other kinds of professional small businesses do they work with? Who would they offer up as a reference? Like those kinds of things. And yet stop and think about it. Most of us have never asked that, have we? So it's just beginning to think like, and do you even like them? Are you certain that they'll help teach you? Like I had a chiropractor that came to me to help with her practice valuation. And she was recommended by somebody to meet with a lawyer and meet with a new accountant that was more focused on these big business structures. And it was right at the time that I was starting to review documents with her and numbers with her. And she met with this one accountant that made her feel so small. And when she told me that, I said, why would you ever work with that person? And so as I looked at her P&Ls and her numbers. I said to her, why wouldn't you just keep working with your same accountant? And then here's some things you could ask that accountant. So we all fall into it, whether it's at the very beginning or here with somebody, she has been in practice for 19 years. And everybody starts to say, oh, well, this accountant or the way they do business, or like my accountant said, well, great, you can go with that group, but let's just see what happens when they're all audited.
I'm having a moment where I'm seeing we have to create some kind of a checklist of things that you ask your accountant when you're considering hiring them. And I think for me specifically, it's a feeling. I need to feel like this person gets me and I can communicate, because I'm going to be talking to them about the most intimate thing ever, money, right? Not so intimate for me, but really intimate for so many people. So I want to make sure that if I throw that ball in their court, they're going to catch it and they're going to be able to throw it back to me. And most importantly, I'm going to know that they caught it. So maybe one of the things that I'll put on my very long to-do list for you guys is to create a checklist of like, these are the things that you want to ask your accountant. And I also want to just make the point that if you're going to get references for somebody that you're considering doing work with, please check the references. I think we make that mistake all too often. So let's just switch gears. I want to talk about budget as a dirty word. Tell us about budget and tell us about what you see and what you hear and the trends in the chiropractic, and really not just chiropractic, but the women in business circles. Go for it.
I'm going to give you my personal example that the word budget for me feels like lack. The word budget feels like all the rules that aren't mine. So in my own life, I pivoted that to the word allocate. Could I learn to allocate and make my decisions on fact versus emotion? So allocating allows me to guide people. Like if you want to write a couple things down, it's that you want to figure out your basic net. How much does it cost you to run your business, to run your practice each month? So that's your hard fixed costs, like your rent, your computer program, like your, all the things that you can't do without. Like many of you lease equipment, like get it in a little checklist. So what's that total? And that becomes your basic monthly business net. But you also need to do this personally, because we confuse needs versus wants versus likes a lot of times on the personal side. Well, I've been a student for so long, so, I want this kind of car. Well, do you need this kind of car or do you need this kind of car? So yes, you need a car, but the rest becomes a want or a like. If you begin to write down your personal basic net, now you know between business and personal life, the basic target that you set as your financial goal. That's what you're going to drive, at least those numbers every month. Then above and beyond that, you begin to build in some discretionary. So some first discretionaries in business are things like ensuring you have all of your right insurance coverages, like still a little of that protection. You still need some good protection, but then you can start to say, wait a minute, I do want to invest in something that's going to build my next phase. So Jody, for you, that probably was investing in some technology. Like eCam costs a certain amount. Well, guess what? All of a sudden you went, okay, here's all my basic costs. And then here's an important piece because of what it will give to me. For some of you, that may be supplements. Like if you've got a nutritional background, I don't. Now, I eventually brought into my clinic a few lines that were professional grade because people were asking for that. You know, now you need to watch though, because a lot of people can get stuff through Amazon. You know, Amazon will sell certain professional grades. So if you though have experience with nutrition and would like to build a system around it, then how much would it cost to get a little basic inventory or to get started? Like, those are the kinds of things you can build now, but you still have to have that basic nut figured out. So what I want you to see is, I don't call it budget just because I hate the word, but also what I learned to build in was paying yourself and even building in what I like to call a key employee or an executive bonus. I teach a lot of people how to build that in as part of their basic budget or allocation, because that's already allowing you to take some of your profit. Think about, I know a lot of people really like profits first. You don't have to have a profit first accountant and all of those things. You just need to figure out how to build some of that in and not waiting until after the fact before you address some of that.
And you guys get that. So a couple of thoughts. One is, let's just take a break. If you guys want the notes from this whole webinar with Dr. Janice, drop your email in the Facebook group, and we're going to include how to interview an accountant. And we're also going to include all of the pieces that she's bringing to this webinar. So go ahead and put your email in. We also have a comment. Sandy Anderson said, one of the best things I ever did was to develop a habit of saving. Even when money was very tight, even if it was $25, a habit of saving gave me empowerment towards my future. As I got further along in practice, I was able to increase my saving. Having it taken, hold on, there are people. So just the concept of saving. So I think it was you that I was interviewing for SEWP School, and you said, spend a little, save a little, and give some away. Was that you?
Yes.
And I keep hearing it in my, honestly, you got in my brain, spend a little, save a little, and give some away. Tell us about that. The whole comment just rocks my world.
I teach this to my kids. So my kids are no longer kids. They're 23, 25, and 30. But I taught my kids, I had to kind of figure out, as I was learning better money principles in my own life, how did I work with my kids? So we had a little chant that said, save some, spend some, and give some away. And I have to say, with a badge of honor, like I find my kids are very generous, but not at the expense of saving some. You know, they'll give away, but they're also saving. They've put into principle. One of the financial coaches that I have really huge respect, and I do a lot of work with him. I have 2 out of my 3 sons work directly with him. One of my sons is a helicopter pilot, works for a level of government. They have pension plans. They have all of that built in. So I kind of taught him how to work with that. But my other 2 boys at 23 and 25 already work with a financial coach. And it comes from those kinds of principles, teaching ourselves how to save some, spend some, and give some away. So even, I'm Canadian originally, and when I was in practice, one of the things in Canada is you could not even write off the interest you paid for your mortgage payments. So, you know, getting your mortgage banged out is a really smart financial principle if you're on the Canadian side. Whole different discussion on the American side. Eventually, you guys all being mortgage free would be my goal anyway. Student debt free, mortgage free, building wealth. But what I learned is I came up with a formula in my own life that allowed me, for every extra dollar, for every extra $100 or $1,000, I knew my percentage of what I put into saving, spending, and giving away. And notice I already covered off my basic nut. I already had my business expenses covered. I already had my home expenses covered. But for the extra, I planned it out, I allocated it so that I never had to think about it. And then that also helped me determine my numbers. Like, I like you to think about your bank accounts are like a waterfall. Like, if you're still keeping everything in your business account, learn to build a personal account, a savings account. Way back, tons of student debt. I still knew that a key thing for myself, based on my personality, I love to travel. I used to do it when I was a student. I'd take time off school. Before I went into chiropractic, I traveled the world. I slept on train station floors. Like I did the whole, go see the world, because that's my personality. Recognizing that when we're in school and we can't do any of that, or as we are also like now in early practice, like that felt so restrictive to me to say, wait a minute, like you have no money to travel. So my husband and I created a separate bank account. We called it our travel account. And we just swung a deal. We said, you know what? We don't need stuff. I don't need you to buy me birthday presents. I don't need you to buy me anniversary presents. Let's take any amount of money we would spend on that and put it into our travel account. I also then learned that was going to be part of my savings. My savings was, I started building a wealth plan sooner than I could afford it. And some went to that and some went to my travel account. So we just built that in. And then I never had to go without travel. And we even did things like my husband and I would rent sailboats in the Caribbean. We couldn't afford to own one. We didn't want to own one, but we couldn't afford to own one. I didn't want to own one in cold country. So we would pre-plan our sailing trips, and out of our travel account, we would make the payments. By the time we went on our sailing trip, we didn't owe a cent because we'd already prepaid for the boat. Everything was paid for. And we just went and didn't stress about coming back and having to pay for it.
Let me ask you a question. How did you guys, so we explore a lot in SEWP School what we actually want. Like, I think so many people coming out of school, we're so used to being pushed to the edge. Or if you've been in practice a while and you're stuck, you're so used to being pushed to the edge where you don't even have the time to think about, what do I want? Do I want to go travel the world? Do I want to so at what point did you guys figure that out about yourselves? Tell us a bit about, because abundance consciousness, one of the important pieces is knowing what you want in your abundance pie, right? So how did you discover that?
We started to take a look when we had nothing. How did we feel when we spent $10 on something? Like, were we spending it on something that felt great, or were we spending it on something that felt really flat? And we started doing self-discovery, like what you were describing. Like, one of the most powerful things you're doing through SEWP School is writing about it, talking about it. Like, what do you want? And you know what? I don't want fancy cars. Now, would I like to drive a nice vehicle? Yes. What do I really need? I'm using this example. Like, I don't judge someone who drives around in their Porsche or Ferrari. That just doesn't do it for me. Versus, I got really, really clear that travel somewhere and sail or do these kinds of explorations. Wow, I feel that. So some of that is personality driven. Now, also make it okay. Some of you listening, your personalities feel so much better with stability. So you putting extra money in a cushion account or building like a wealth plan, wow, that'll feel great. So you start to explore that, just like you're doing, Jody. Like, you're talking about it, you're writing about it, like, and it's really, it comes out in everybody's goals. Even like people, I used to, as I coach people, say, okay, this is safe. I'm not asking you to show me your goals because I will judge them or think they're right or wrong. What I'm going to ask you is, how do they make you feel? Or like, why is that important to you? Like when something's really important to you, and this is where what I love about for females in practice, it felt so crazy to me that when I was graduating, people always talked about, well, you have to have Saturdays. Saturdays is where you're going to see 11% of your volume in practice. I had a young son. I'd already juggled him through school. I'd spent all those years in school and it felt like 7 days a week. And I went, for God's sakes, I don't want to practice on Saturdays. So I'm willing to give up that might be 11% of my volume. But guess what? I bet you I can make it up somewhere else. So I never practice Saturdays. Now, I'm not telling you if you practice Saturdays, that's a problem. Some people love it. I have a chiropractic friend that still goes in. She has 3 associates and her favorite is to go in on a Saturday morning and she sees a whole bunch of people that she's seen for years. She loves it. For me, I didn't want to work Saturdays. So it's just starting to like tap into, and you're describing it, Jody, like, and sorry, I'm pivoting because you can see the sun. I'm like trying to get into the shade a little bit. But you can see that you guys are talking about it and the things that matter the most to you. And why wouldn't we figure that out and build that in? And the clearer you get on that, the more you'll build your business.
I promise you guys, this is all possible. If you're sitting here thinking, this is all really quite, it's kind of like how I remember going to Weight Watchers meetings and seeing this skinny, tiny little lady at the front of the room. She had the cute little outfit on and everything, her shoes matched her belt and it all worked out for her. And she's talking about the 4 ounces of chicken and and I'm sitting here thinking, I am never going to freaking be able to do this, right? I promise you, if you take it one step at a time, you'll be able to do this. And I also—
You're so right. Yeah. Because I say to everybody all the time, if I could do this, anybody can do it.
Right.
Literally, like literally. And so when you have people in the profession holding over you, well, you need to pay me to learn this, or you need to like be part of this to learn that. Like, please don't say, there's really, really good people out there. There's great things and programs that you hold the keys to the kingdom. Just like we're saying financially, let's teach you how to make those decisions. Well, let's teach you what feels good. And so, like money wise, if I can't figure out what feels good with $10 or $100, how the hell am I going to decide what to spend $1,000 or $10,000 on?
Where do you, when you talk about something that feels good, where in your body do you feel it? Where does it feel good to you? How does it feel good?
Very deep. So that's the difference between happiness versus satisfaction versus fulfillment.
She's cool, right, guys? You guys are hearing this, right? Keep going. This is awesome.
See, happiness is kind of out here, or it's very surface and it's on the skin. And that often means that it's fleeting. You can wash it off. Satisfaction is where we start to feel it a little deeper, like it sticks with us more. But I'm going to tell you, fulfillment is at your core. Like, I apologize in advance about the sun and the light and me moving my camera. And I had to send Jody a message. Like, I'm living in a house. We built a house. We bought land in a place I'd never been and had to do it from afar in COVID. And then I had to live as a gypsy life for this year. And we're in the house, but the outside is a mess. And all the stucco people showed up an hour and a half ago. And I said to Jody, oh my God, we have no blinds. That's why the sun, you can see me pivoting. Like, pretty soon I'm going to have to take you to my kitchen, because I have no blinds. I have all these workmen staring in the window at me. And, but I'm going to tell you that I'm laughing about it. Something that there'd have been a phase of my life that would have stressed the hell out of me. But I am so fulfilled living in this new house. We wanted to move in, whether the outside was pretty and done or not. Like, to the point, you guys, that people, the first few weeks we were here, we'd walk out and people go, oh my God, someone's living in that house. Like I'm talking like it's that disastrous. Like I have sand piles. Friday, I'm in my office and a dump truck is backing up into like almost onto my house. And so fulfillment though is we just don't care. And every one of you has something. Like how many of you got into chiropractic because it was just right?
Or because it was a calling. It was,
yes.
I became a chiropractor because I felt like I had no, like, that's what I am. You know, it's like,
that's fulfillment.
Right.
And so you were willing to pay whatever price and do the stupid ass school and whatever it took to graduate. And that's called fulfillment. So that's where you feel it. When you feel something there, when you feel your goal there, when you feel like, you know, a desire from there, like run, you know. And so I like to describe that I had to learn how to say no, because saying no allows me to get to the right yeses. So for example, if we go back to the money and the accountants and the financial planners, do not think I'm judging your financial planner that's your best friend. But God, how much wealth do they have? That's the litmus test with some of these advisors. How wealthy is your financial planner? And that's what, like, 401ks and in Canada RRSPs are not a long-term wealth strategy for many of us. But that's what they're selling you. A lot of financial people are product driven to sell you a product. So like I say, I'm not passing a judgment. I'm just saying, look at it for what it is and getting excited. My 25-year-old, after getting off the phone with this financial coach, called me up and said, I know I can do it. I've been stressed, but I know that I can do some smart, simple things and become a world-class saver and not spend all my money. That's miraculous. This is my son that will spend every cent. And his DNA is different than my youngest. My youngest probably still has the $100 he got from his grandparents for Christmas when he was 12. Like he has a bank account that's more liquid than all of us on this call. So each of my kids' DNA is even different about money. That's the thing, you have a money DNA, it's so deep in us that if you start feeling it and tapping into it, you can rewrite that DNA and take some action, some really smart money actions, and you'll feel so fulfilled, even though you don't have any more money than you had yesterday, but you'll feel different about it.
I love it. So, guys, if you have questions, I'm still watching the comment field. I also want to remind you that if you are watching this before, during, or after, you can go ahead and drop your email and we'll send you the notes from the webinar. And I'm also going to send you a checklist of how to interview, you know, not only an accountant, but also a financial advisor, a financial coach, a financial planner. So in conclusion, let's go to, I'd love to hear a couple of things from you. Please give us your top 2 favorite systems for creating balance with money.
Number 1 is called the 52-week money challenge. And I love it if you start at the beginning of the year doing it because it makes it really easy, but you can do this starting this week. Is week 1, you save $1. Week 2, you save $2. Week 15, you save $15. And what you're doing is just like Sandy said, you're building a habit of saving. Now, I like it in that simple a form because everybody goes, well, I can save $1. My kids, I did this with my sons when they were in high school. And the beginning ones are really easy. My youngest, the one who's such an incredible saver, he was a triple sport athlete, so had no job. He could have had a job at 3 a.m, but who's going to hire him for that? But that kid did the 52-week money challenge, and I saved it. I was the keeper of the money. We all did it, and I was the keeper of the money. And my middle son phased out around week 10. My youngest He figured out that by week 50 and 51 and 52 was when the Christmas money came in. And so I kept the money. And by the end of that, you've saved just under, slightly under $1,400, $1,387. And that stack of money, like having that and the exercise that has just taught you, that'll change you forever. So first action is 52-week money challenge. Second action is I would love to teach you or show you or introduce you to a financial coach. Not a planner, not someone who's going to charge you anything, someone who can take a look at where you are and help you begin to pivot and build a wealth plan, even though you might not have dollars to fund it yet. So those two actions can change your entire future.
You know, it would be really cool, Dr. Janice, is if we could interview the financial coach in this group live. So if
great idea, I know Chris will do that.
Because you guys know I'm going to hook you up. So let's go to, I do have one question for you. For the people in this group, the people who are listening to this video are in a situation where they find themselves either needing automation in their practice or without staff. What would you say to them, being familiar with what we're doing with SEWP School? What would you say to them if they're on the fence about joining SEWP School?
You have to think in terms of things not as a cost, but as an investment. What will you get in return? So just as an example, Jody gives you checklists. Jody, like I watched, like again, a couple things you produced, and you know, I try not to spend much time on social media because it's almost like it's everyone's highlight reel versus real. And yet, like within these groups, I see some of the posts and the content, and like that's not a cost, that's an investment. So what will you get in return is a smarter question to begin to ask yourself for this or other things. Like the Jane app is a perfect example. I've never used Jane. There was no such thing as all these real fun, easy automations when I was in practice. Then as we went to computer programs, it was so big and convoluted, and then they all cost so much money. And first time I saw Jane, I started saying to every student in every class I taught, like, start with Jane. So that's an investment. You know, and look at it's grown. And like I said, I don't use it, so I can't even tell you how to do it or what to do, but I know Jody's got, like I watched a webinar where you were interviewing a little bit on it because my husband's doing a new project and I'm suggesting he do Jane. So like, think about these things. Cost is kind of a weird word. Could you think about an investment and how fast can you apply it? What can you learn from it? And therefore, did you really spend money or did you invest in something?
I so appreciate that. Last night, I was talking to one of SEWP School's consultants, and he was saying, it's so incredible what you've done because you've taken all of the dirty work. Like people don't no longer have to investigate what the best software company is. I've done it for them and I've explained why. They don't have to create the checklist. They don't have to figure out how to talk about money because we're giving them all of those solutions. So with that being said, any other questions out in the Facebook group, guys? I don't see any. I'm gonna say, with all of the love in my heart, thank you so much for saying yes and believing in what we're doing and being a powerful example for the women in practice all over the world. My heart is completely open to you and yours, and I'm just filled with great gratitude for you spending the time with us this morning.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. And, you know, I think it's so important. Part of my mission is helping women practitioners thrive. You know, I I will rest when I've created an army of women millionaires. Like that's the opportunity. Like it's not about 1 year, it's about year over year over year. And so you think about, even just thinking like that, it helps you make decisions differently. So bringing up money conversations, and I promise to you, Chris will connect. I'll connect to Jody, and Chris will, so it's going to take a little bit to figure that out, but we can bring him to you. Or, again, it's no different than the principles that he taught. He has taught my kids the vitalistic principles about money, the things that I believe, but I can't be a prophet in my own home. So he is the person that I have my kids refer to and use. So I know Chris would be happy to have that.
We're going to have fun to dance with Chris in the SEWP School world. So thank you, Dr. Janice, and thank you for your time. Thanks, ladies, for joining us in the group.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.